All right, well, it's a few minutes after 2, so we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to Chik-Wauk and to the Nature Center. My name is Caroline. I'm a naturalist here at Chik-Wauk. Before we start off the presentation, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our sponsors, Visit Cook County and also the Gunflint Trail Association. Their support allows us to have such a good variety of different speakers throughout the course of the summer. So many of you are familiar faces and have been to our speakers before, but in case you're not aware, throughout the summer and into the fall we have presenters that come to our Nature Center and share about different topics related to the Northwoods. So next week we have Lee Freilich joining us. He will be here next Sunday at 2 o'clock. He will be sharing all about the history of fire and wind on the Gunflint Trail. So that should be a super fun one for everybody. So anyway, you can also check out the rest of them that we have throughout the summer and into the fall on our website if you're interested. But I am getting a bit ahead of myself. Today we have Tia and Abigail joining us. They are coming from the Cook County Invasives Team, and they're going to be telling us all about terrestrial invasive species. So let's welcome them up.
Hi everybody, I'm Tia Parks. I'm your Cook County Ag Inspector, and I also coordinate the Cook County Invasives Team. I'm going to hand it off to Abigail a little bit later, but Abigail's our environmental technician for the county. We do work on terrestrial invasive species. And today we're talking specifically about species on the Gunflint Trail. So common things that you're going to see along the Gunflint Trail, maybe on your properties, and then you can really see them around the county as well. But yeah. So what we'll cover first is invasive species basics. I go over this for any presentation, whether it's students at the schools, all the way up to adults on invasive species basics. We have to make sure that we cover that before we can understand everything else. Then we're going to talk about some common invasive species like I mentioned, and then effective means of control. And then creating a management plan for your site, community invasive species programs, and planting responsibly. So first, a couple definitions. These can kind of get a little mixed together on people's understandings of native versus non-native and invasive species. After I get through with this, I'll also talk about noxious weeds, which is my main job. But so, native species first, they naturally and historically occur here. So, from the first time that the Northwoods could actually grow plants, it's those kind of things. So, we have many species of goldenrods, asters, our native trees, cedars, ash trees, all of those things when you think about native. And some native species can become nuisances. So like here I mentioned some goldenrod and even bracken fern can cause nuisance issues, so they can take over a whole area, whatever that might be for them. Moving on to non-native species. So non-native species, as it says, they're not from here, they're not native to our area. And just because they're non-native, it doesn't mean that they cause harm, but they might. They might even add some benefits to our environment. And then invasive species. So when we get to invasive species, we're talking about species that are non-native and they cause economic, social, or environmental harm or harm to human health. So that's the big word here is harm. Invasive species cause harm. Any questions about those definitions? Pretty basic. It's pretty fun to see our students at the schools learn those definitions as we go on through the years. So just some pictures here for examples. Anybody know what the native species is?
Columbine.
Yeah, that is our red columbine. Anybody know what this middle one is, this non-native one? There's one sitting over by the window over there. It's a small one. Any ideas?
Mullen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, common mullen. Yeah, common mullen is non-native. It typically just inhabits exposed rocky areas that aren't really growing anything anyway. So a lot of gravel pits, a lot of roadside areas. They're also known for a lot of medicinal properties. But yeah, we mostly consider mullen just non-native. It's not causing a lot of real detrimental harm to the environment. It just doesn't have the capacity to do so.
But they are not invasive at all.
Correct, yeah. They can grow in pockets, but yeah. No, we don't consider those invasive species that we really have to monitor and take care of. And then this invasive species, what's this one called?
Hawkweed.
Hawkweed, yep. So we do still consider hawkweed an invasive species. It's pretty much here become naturalized in some ways because it's everywhere. If you don't have hawkweed on your lawn, I don't know how you've done it, but keep it out there. Yeah, so hawkweeds, we have two kinds. This is orange hawkweed, and I'll actually talk about it a little bit later, and then we have a second one, the yellow one. It's called a meadow hawkweed. But yeah, I'll get into that one later. They're pretty neat species, but we'll talk about them a little bit. So noxious weeds. So being the county ag inspector, every county in the state has an ag inspector. And what we're tasked with is enforcing the Noxious Weed Law. So our state actually has a fully regulated law on invasive species. And there's 40 to 50 species that are listed on the noxious weeds list, which you can find online. We actually have whole books with our state noxious weeds in here. The species that end up on this list, they go through at least a 3-year assessment to determine how much detriment they cause and if it's worthy of them being placed on this list and where they get placed on the list. So by definition, noxious weeds are plants that the Commissioner of Agriculture designates as having the potential or are known to be detrimental to human health, environment, public roads, crops, livestock, other property. Basically the definition of invasive species. And then there are 5 categories. Prohibited eradicate being number 1. So prohibited eradicate, you can think of that as our top invasive species. The ones that we don't really have much of yet across the state. We have one of these species in Cook County. It's called Dalmatian toadflax. There's a population on Kramer Road, and then there's a population near Lockport Marketplace. It's kind of a yellow snapdragon looking species, so if you have any snapdragons in your garden, they kind of look like that. But again, those are our top guns that we absolutely have to eradicate. Our efforts have to be aimed at eradication, so that means completely wiping out that population. Number 2 is prohibited control. Most of the noxious weeds that are in Cook County fall into the prohibited control category. What that means is that the only thing we can enforce is that you actually put into place management and efforts to control the population that exists. So you can't let it get outside of that and grow further, but it might not quite be feasible to eradicate unless it's a very small population. Maybe it is just on your property and you can actually get rid of it there, but actually trying to eradicate at the state level or even the county level is very difficult. And then number 3 is restricted. So restricted is kind of where we drop off on how much control needs to be done or that can be enforced. So for restricted, it just means that you can't sell it, you can't transport it, any of those things without a permit. And that rule also applies to those first 2 as well. So you can't sell them, you can't transport them, at least without a permit. And where would you get that permit? You get that permit from me. And then finally I have, there's 2 more, sorry. Specially regulated. So specially regulated species can actually be native species. So some of those ones that you have to watch that can just really seed and take over a spot. If we move them, let's say from southeast Minnesota to northeast Minnesota where we are, they can become an issue in that area if they haven't been tested. And so those are typically native species that we just try to keep an eye on and try to control and keep in their native areas. And then lastly, number 5, county noxious weeds, the shortest list out of all of these. So we have 2 county noxious weeds. One is marsh thistle, and then the other is garden valerian. And I'll actually be talking about garden valerian later. Marsh thistle looks like a lot of the other thistles that we see around, even some of our native swamp thistle, the invasive Canada thistle, except it's really tall. It can get up to, I think we saw one probably about 8 feet the other day. I have a fun picture of Abigail next to one. And I won't be going into detail about it today, but we are one of 2 spots in the state of Minnesota that has marsh thistle. Yeah, one of 2 spots. Luckily it's very small. It's near George Washington's Hines. Abigail and I actually went and took care of it for the season the other day. And then there's one other spot, it's in Lake County. But county noxious weeds are regulated in the same way that number 2 is. Prohibited control, meaning we can actually enforce efforts to maintain those populations and keep them down and not let them grow outside of that. it's a lot of mumbo jumbo. So there's an amazing website for noxious weeds. Again, the list, and it gives full definitions of prohibited, eradicate, prohibited, control, et cetera, and it also lists the species one after the other, and you can click on them and you can go look at those species profiles as well. I already said species go through a 3-year assessment to be added to the noxious weeds list, so there's around about 10 species that are being assessed right now. They'll slowly be added and stay where they are and move up. So, how do they get here? Humans. Is the best way to put it. Humans. So plant nurseries and online sales, a lot of invasive species actually start as ornamental species. If any of you have heard of common buckthorn, especially if you're from larger cities, common buckthorn was just a normal species that you could buy at a plant nursery, and people planted it traditionally as kind of a border, a little wall, so they couldn't see a hedgerow, if you will. So a lot of things like that, plant nurseries and online sales. Online sales are crazy. Abigail will talk to you more about that later, but you can get some interesting things on online sales, even things that are listed as noxious weeds. And then heavy equipment and construction, as you can imagine, a lot of those big machines that are being used at construction sites, the gravel that's being moved, they have seeds on it, or other viable propagating parts, so root fragments that can grow, whatever that might be. Agriculture, so some species were brought here to be food. One of our really fun noxious weeds, wild parsnip, it's one that can actually cause 3rd-degree burns. If you come into contact with the sap and then the sap is exposed to UV light, it can cause up to 3rd-degree burns. We do have a native one, it's called cow parsnip, but they're very different, so don't get confused. And they're in these books if anybody wants to look at it later. But wild parsnip was brought here to actually be a food source. I can't remember if that was in the 1800s, it might have been further beyond that. Mowing, so if you've got lupin in the ditch, and the lupin are in seed like they are right now, and a mower goes through and chops them up and it's spitting them out, lupin, which can't move very well on its own, really likes that. So it likes to be thrown where it can grow and kind of expand out of its range. Animals, so whether that be your dogs or deer, just trampling through an area that's gone to seed. So maybe the deer that we saw on the way up went through some hawkweed fluffs, and those hawkweed seeds grabbed onto it and they took it to the next spot. But yes, humans, and animals. That's how we get invasive species. Any questions so far? Yes?
You might actually cover it, but when you have that top noxious weed, that top bad level, the dragon,
The snapdragon.
What's the negative benefit? Like, what makes it the top bad thing?
So what makes an invasive species and what makes that one so bad? It really is mostly how well and easily it can be dispersed and how much detriment it causes. So like the thing I mentioned earlier, wild parsnip that can cause burns, that one, it gives it a pretty high ranking. It's not quite the eradicate, but it is a prohibited control. And then it also goes to be how much of it there is in the state. So if there's very little of it and it causes high detriment, that's a pretty good recipe for prohibited eradicate. So yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. The assessment sheets are pages and pages long on what they're looking at. But yeah, hopefully that answers it.
I was just more curious, like, does that dragonfly take over native species?
Yes.
Does it?
Yep. So,
okay, so that's
it's called
nice.
Dalmatian toadflax, and it does. So the worst that we've seen it has been across the state in agricultural lands. So it can take over whole fields. And then when it gets into our native areas, it does the same exact thing. It just grows. It has a pretty extensive root system that can expand and just take over a whole area and kind of become a map.
Yeah, and I think that one in particular is like noxious for cattle. Like they
Yes.
they might die if they eat it as well.
Yeah.
So that's a big reason. Not necessarily up here, but for other parts of the state.
Yeah, so yes, very toxic to cattle. A lot of these things are toxic to cattle. Tansy, I've got that one here. It's outside as well. Tansy is also toxic to cattle. But yeah, there's a lot that goes into it, and sometimes it makes sense for other counties to have that regulation. over others. So that's when you get to choose on your Cook County Noxious Weeds list. Because garden valerian and marsh thistle, like I mentioned earlier, those things aren't listed at the state level. Forgot to mention that. But we have chosen to regulate them here in Cook County because we're just not far enough ahead to know anything about marsh thistle like other states have it. And so we're ahead of it as a county. And then with garden valerian, which again, we'll talk about that one in a little bit. For garden valerian, there's too much of it in St. Louis County. And that is why the state chose not to regulate it as a noxious weed. Because Cook County, or not Cook County, St. Louis County would have to take all of the enforcement. And trying to enforce something that's completely taken over your whole county, it's not feasible. You can't enforce that. But for us, where we just have, up to 20 populations of it that are really small, we can get a hold of it, especially at a county level, the Forest Service, as well as us and other entities being able to take care of it, stay ahead of it, so we don't become like St. Louis County. But yeah, we'll get into that one a little more, and its particularities. Hopefully that answers it. It's intricate. The noxious weed list and the rankings are really intricate, but yeah, I've got a lot of information on their assessments and things like that. So, the invasion curve. Where is invasive species falling on this curve, this exponential curve? So on our left, we have the amount of area infested. So is it 5 square feet? Is it 20 acres? Whatever that is. And then on the far right, we have control cost. So the more it is, the more it costs to take care of it. And then on the bottom here, we have time. And with that, an exponential curve of where we're going with invasive species management. So we start off almost always with prevention and early detection. So we always hope to catch things right away when they make it into the county or anywhere else. And even before they get here, we do a lot of outreach. So a lot of outreach to educate folks, kind of like we're doing today, to just avoid getting invasive species to our county. So that could be cleaning gear, just knowing about the species, whatever that is. And then eradication. So when we have small numbers of a population, so even here, if it was just the population of tansy that Chik-Wauk has, maybe it's just, again, 10 square feet. That's something we can get rid of. That's something we can eradicate here. We're thinking on a larger scale, we're thinking about marsh thistle, where there's only 2 populations in the state, definitely can try to eradicate those things. As we move up, we kind of go to containment. So containing, again, that word control, we're just controlling that population and not letting it expand outside of where it is. Then beyond that, when things really get out of hand, and hawkweed is a decent example of this, and not really that we're trying to manage it here at all, we're not. But if it was your property, we're thinking about what we're trying to protect. So if I'm going to manage the hawkweed that's on my property, but not the rest that's in the county, I have to determine what I'm trying to protect, if it's worth it, and just plan for a really long time of managing. If I catch it early, maybe it only takes me a year or 2 to get rid of it. If I catch it here where it's taking over acres and acres, I'm just trying to figure out what I don't want to be destroyed at that point. Yeah, so some things get that way. Tansy is kind of like that for us in Cook County. There's a lot of it. And it would take a lot of money for us to actually get rid of all the tansy. Any questions about the invasion curve? Pretty simple. So, managing invasive species as a landowner. Kind of think of this as the steps you should follow to start managing things on your property. So, number 1, identify the invasive species. You got to know what you're looking at. So, if it's lupin, you want to know, this is lupin, what kind of lupin is it? Well, it's largely lupin, non-native. Then 2, I'm going to size it up. Do I have it just in the ditch? Do I have it completely taking over my yard? Just kind of figure out how big it is. Do you have multiple acres that are fully covered in tansy? Things like that. So size it up, make sure you know what the invasive species is, because if you're treating the wrong thing, maybe it's a native species. You don't want to do that. Number 3, research and ask questions about your invasive species. So this is where you go online and making sure that you fully know it. You can always call myself or Abigail, even the local extension office. Always a good resource. You can call the DNR, any agency that handles these things. You can absolutely call us and ask questions. And then number 4, we're going to create short-term and long-term goals. So this is again what we're trying to protect. So if it's your property and you have a lot of native species or you have a lot of forested land, maybe that's what you're trying to protect. Maybe you have a big garden and that's what you're trying to protect. Short-term goals can be, I want to manage the first acre of hotweed that I have in one season. I want to manage that, and then I want to see where it goes from there. I want to test a new herbicide and see if that works. I want to see if hand pulling works. Long-term goals, a lot of invasive species projects are multi-year labors of love. So some of these things, even some of the places that we manage, depending on the species, it could be us doing that for up to a decade. Others, it can be just a couple of years. Really depends on the species. So short-term and long-term goals, you definitely want to have those. You can sit down and write them out. You can have them in your head. And then number 5, gather supplies and implement control. So whether that's clippers or gloves or herbicides, whatever that might be, and you have all your information that you need to know about your species and what's going to take care of it, then you can implement your control. And number 6, as we move on through the years of managing our site, we want to make sure that we have a revegetation plan. So any invasive species project, to make it a full management project, we have to have seeding and native planting. Because we might just be killing a whole spot, but what's going to come back there? Some things will slowly move in from the edge if you've got native species, but a lot of times they need help. So you definitely want to have a revegetation plan, otherwise you've just got a lot of exposed ground. That's a great spot for more invasive species to kind of fill in. So yes, always have a revegetation plan. And again, like I've said this whole time, it's a long-term commitment and a labor of love, so be patient, consistent, take a breath when it feels overwhelming, and make sure to look back at your goals. It's always important to remember, as we're working through things that can be hard, especially physically, that we're remembering what we're protecting, our native species, or whatever else we're trying to protect, even our human health. So, common invasive species along the Gunflint Trail. So for this section, I'm just going to highlight, I think it's 6 profiles of invasive species, and we'll just talk about those a little bit. So these are common species that you might see right now, actually, along the Gunflint. So spotted knapweed, I have this one here. I'll put my glove on so I can hold it up. And you guys are welcome to come up after the presentation and look at these as well. I pulled this one at the highway department, actually. But key characteristic, and this is just now starting to pop up, is the flower. It's a bright pink flower. It's even kind of a lighter color than maybe a Canada thistle. But yes, bright pink flower. These conical things at the end, the bracts, they have these little lines. You can see these black triangles. That's what gives it the name spotted. So it looks kind of spotted on its bracts. So where's flowers coming out of? So spotted knapweed. Their leaves are deeply lobed and pinnately compound. So they're all coming off of one branch. And then this is a rosette. So in their first year of life after they germinate, they're always going to be just this basal leaf on the ground. And they're not going to shoot up a stem in a flower. Here's another closer look at the leaves. They get kind of smaller and more narrow as they go up the stem. They have multiple branches, you can see that here. They get pretty tall. They can get up to 4 feet tall. There's some pretty big ones popping up right now. And actually in the area we're in on the Gunflint Trail, there's a lot of it from around Round Lake Road, not so much quite there, but then going all the way up to the end of the trail. We have quite a bit of it. Just got mowed last week, so we're not going to see too much of it right now. We have an event actually surrounding this that I'll talk about at the end. And there's some cute little bugs here. They look like Star Wars characters. You can kind of see them. And so these bugs are weevils. So for some invasive species, there is biocontrol, and that's a management technique. So biocontrol is a native predator, so a predator that is native to where knapweed is from. So knapweed is from Eurasia. These bugs are from Eurasia and have gone through at least 2 decades of assessment to figure out if they're just going to target knapweed or if they're going to target native species and harm other things. Luckily for us, they only target knapweed. So we can actually use these bugs on really large infestations, and we actually put some out just last year at the old airport runway near Devil Track. There's a lot of knapweed there. It's kind of the epicenter for Cook County. But these bugs will actually go in, and there's 2 different kinds. You can see the different colors here. So one of the bugs will eat flowering heads, so that means that that flower won't go to seed. And you can imagine if it can't go to seed, it can't disperse seeds. And then the other one will actually crawl into the root system and bore through each root. And when you deplete the roots of a plant, everything else is going to go down from there. So yeah, the only things about biocontrol are that the area must be undisturbed. So that means no snowmobiles running over it in the wintertime, no mowing in the summer, no ATVs, no loud, crazy noises all the time. They're pretty sensitive to that. So if these areas, if we're thinking about biocontrol and an area is disturbed, we just can't. You can't use it. The bugs are too sensitive, and the population will die. So the runway was a great place for that because it's unused right now, and Commissioner Sullivan actually helped us make sure that nothing was going to be mowed, nothing was going to happen there. So yeah, seems like a great spot. We have signs up right now, but we'll see how it goes. We just dropped those last year. And there's also, if anybody knows what purple loosestrife is, it's a wetland species. We have many populations of that in Cook County, and we just dropped some beetles, second-year beetles, at a site in Lutzen. And lucky enough, we put them out for the first time last year, and we came back during their reproduction season this year, and they were back. So that's really great to see. So we're in some early biocontrol efforts in Cook County right now. Yeah. So this is a really great resource. We have a binder up here with life cycle graphics. So this one is specific for spotted knapweed. You can also find this on the Department of Agriculture's website. So it just goes, as you can see, through life stages. So if we start here from seed, seedling, rosette, so that bottom one that comes the first year, when it's bolting, so when the stem is coming up, when it's flowering, and then when it goes to senescence and it looks dead for the season. When it has all of its seeds full, and if you mess with it, the seeds are going everywhere. And with that, you'll see these little icons right here, and then there's a description on the side. So, hand pulling, digging roots, mowing, foliar spray, biocontrol, grazing with goats. We don't do any goat grazing here, but it would be pretty cute if we did. I've actually seen some for bun farm where the goats have high-vis vests on, kind of like what you do for your dogs for hunting season. And it's a pretty cute ordeal, but we don't have that going on here. So because of how the plant is moving nutrients from the flowers and the leaves down to the roots, each plant kind of has its time when you want to treat it and how you want to treat it. So for spotted knapweed, you can graze, you can do a foliar spray, foliar meaning leaves. You're spraying herbicide on it, you're spraying leaves. You can do those things throughout most of its life cycle up until you get to about the flowering stage. Then we're thinking about just hand pulling, mowing, and still spray, but maybe not graze. The grazing kind of goes away because some of these are going to start getting seeds. And so you can imagine the goat can get the seeds and it goes through them and they don't digest and it can just kind of spread it and exacerbate the issue. But yeah, so these life cycle graphics are really, really neat things to use, especially for landowners. Just so we know, this is when I should be targeting this species to make sure that whatever I'm doing is going to knock down that root system that ultimately knocks down the whole plant. Any questions about that? There's a lot to these pictures. So moving on to our next species, common tansy. I mentioned that one already. I have it here. I am wearing gloves. Common tansy can be an irritant for some folks. It kind of depends on the person. I'm pretty sensitive. My skin is, at least, so I try to wear gloves when I'm messing with tansy. Yeah, so tansy, the dead giveaway for tansy are these yellow buttons for flowers. So these bright yellow buttons, we're not quite there yet. There are some that are really getting vibrantly yellow, but we got another couple weeks here before they get this yellow. The leaves, so the leaves are fern-like. So if you see something that's really small, kind of looks like a fern, but it's really thick and robust, those are probably tansy leaves. There's a lot of it. If you drive through Grand Marais, it is tansy. Tansy Marais, it should probably be. There's a lot of it. The root systems really aren't too dramatic, which makes it an easy target, really, for control efforts. Tansy's seed bank only lasts up to 3 years. There have been some rogue seeds that can last maybe decades, but typically it's only up to 3 years. You know, everything can kind of have its time. And then this is what they look like when they go to seed. So they get really brown, they get these seeds that can just kind of go everywhere. So that's tansy. We all kind of know what that one looks like. Here's its life cycle graphic. And again, these icons and what you can actually do will change depending on the species. So some species we can't graze, some species we can't pull, we can't dig, and maybe herbicide is really the only option. I don't have any of those species on here today, but knotweed, if anybody's ever heard of that, it's like a big bamboo plant. We probably have up to 20 sites of that that we control for landowners. And that one, that's herbicide. It can have up to a 60-foot long root system. And pulling it, it can fragment and propagate and grow from anything. So even a stem fragment, if you cut it and a stem fragment hits the ground, it can grow a plant from that. Any of those root fragments you leave in the ground, it can grow from that. Tansy is a special one where it can also grow from root fragments. So digging is typically a pretty nice option for that. But you can still pull, because when you pull and you pull and you pull year after year, you're really, really tiring out that root system. So it is an effective means of control still for tansy, even though it can grow from some root fragments. Mowing is still a good option for tansy as well. We had a landowner the other day, they got a couple acres of tansy. They got some backpack sprayers from us and did about a half an acre of herbicide management, but they're going to mow the rest that they weren't able to spray. So they're going to keep mowing that through the flowering season. So we've got a couple, probably about a month or so for tansy to keep pushing up and trying to flower. So they're going to keep that mowed down and try to knock down that seed bank or any new seeds that are coming up. But yeah, lots of options. And again, it's all really depending on what life stage we're in. So that's a really important thing as you're making your management plans. Know when the best time to manage your species is. Garden valerian, my favorite and my least favorite, all at the same time. Mm-hmm. So, has anybody seen garden valerian or planted it before? Anybody?
I've seen it, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. So garden valerian has been around since ancient Greece. It has been used medicinally for forever. And there's also research that it can cause kidney failure in high amounts, so be careful if you're using valerian. I know it's sold all over the place, and yeah, a lot of people still use it, and herbalists grow it. But this is the one that I said that's taken over St. Louis County, so if you're driving down to Duluth and back, just look along Highway 61. You're going to see this stuff right now. It's in full flower. If you get out of your car next to a population of this, it smells terrible. It's a really perfumey smell, which they have used it in perfumes over time. But it just smells really bad. I don't like that. But yeah, they have these kind of light pink flowers, and sometimes they can be a little bit brighter. They get pretty tall. I actually took a picture with one on Friday that was almost 7 feet tall, which was kind of surprising. I didn't even realize they got quite that tall, but yeah. They can get pretty tall. Their seeds are little feathers. Out of all the species that we contend with, the seeds on this one are the worst. They can fly for miles. So you can imagine that little feather just getting picked up in a heavy wind that we get here, heavy west wind, and it just moves from there. So we can find valerian a mile, 2 or 3 miles from an existing population. So that makes it pretty hard to manage. And then the leaves are pretty startling to look at, and pretty contrasting with the native environment. Also pineally compound, again growing from that one stem. In their first year that they choose to grow after germination, they will leaf out, but they won't go to flower. Typically they can wait anywhere from 1 to many years before they flower. They kind of choose their conditions and decide to flower whenever they're ready, whenever it's going to be a good year for them to spread their seed. They can also grow through root fragments. Luckily, they don't have quite as a robust root system as tansy. Their root systems are much smaller, which is nice, so less room for fragmentation. And then once they grow up, they get nice and tall. They have these reddish, brownish stalks as they go up, kind of a purplish tint to them sometimes. And then their leaves get smaller as they go up and much fewer, and then these big basal leaves kind of stay at the bottom. And then this is a picture of a bunch of valerian in seed. So you can see this one, just a pretty easy tell that this is taking over this whole area. They really like wet areas too. We were managing a spot on the Gunflint Trail the other day where it's surrounding a creek, and that's all you could see, was just valerian everywhere, and some knotweed that they had mixed in as well. But on the Gunflint Trail, we actually only have 2 populations that we really manage right now. One's pretty big near Gunflint Lake, and then the other one's near Hungry Jack Lake. And then there's been a couple random pop-ups, luckily that the Forest Service spotted and took care of right away, near Seagull, near the public landing. But yeah, garden valerian. I don't have a life cycle graphic for this one. These life cycle graphics, again, come from the Department of Agriculture, so those are only going to be for state-listed noxious weeds. So we had them for the first 2. I made this page based off the Department of Transportation's noxious weed law. Like I said, it's prohibited control, and it's for Cook County only. So we're the only ones that have it listed. These things have really great information, from common names that you'll hear that aren't the scientific name. This is an herbaceous perennial, so life cycle, their native range, Europe and Asia, habitat, means of spread, how to ID them based on their leaves or flowers, and then this part, super helpful, management. So we can use mechanical and chemical control for garden valerian, and then we have a treatment calendar here. So at the bottom, you can't quite see this, it's a little small, but these are months in the growing season. So right here we have April through December, and whether you can spray it, or you can mow it, or when you don't need to mow it because it's got seed. So these books are super helpful, especially across the professional field. You can use these to look at, and then even as homeowners, you can use them as well. So yeah, that's garden valerian. It's a tricky one. If you see it, let us know. There's always a new population every year. Now we're getting further into, we're off the noxious weed list now, and we are at non-native species that are still invasive, but kind of playing the line of it. There's too much of it. And so at a professional level or at a county level, we don't actually manage these species that I'm going to talk about now. So we got this one here, white sweet clover. If you drove up the Gunflint Trail today, which I think you all did, it's everywhere. Why is that? Because it was added to a lot of seed mixes a long time ago, and still is in a lot of them. It's a legume, so it's easy to grow. It can grow wherever. It changes the soil to high nitrogen levels, so it doesn't allow a lot of our native species to grow, and it gets pretty tall. Again, it's unregulated. Just one of these plants can grow up to 100,000 seeds, so that's a lot. It's a big number. It's not quite purple loosestrife. Purple loosestrife can do almost 4 million seeds per plant. That's a lot. And then the kicker for this one, 40 years of viability. 40 years of seed viability. So even if Abigail and I started managing a population today, we would probably be retired. And it would still come back. Control methods, so if you're doing this at a property level, mechanical hand pulling is super effective. It's got quite a tap root, this bottom thing. So you definitely want to bend your knees and pull straight up. This one can be pretty hard to pull, but after a good rain, great time to go pull them. And then chemical, so foliar spraying, again, that's the leaves, super effective for sweet clover. 2,4-D, I just mentioned that on there. It's a pretty common herbicide that homeowners can get on their own. And two, a common misconception about sweet clovers is that they are the same species. This white one and this yellow one, they're actually not the same species. They look pretty much darn near alike, but genetically they do have differences. So the white one is albus, and then the yellow one is officinalis. Fun fact when you get to tell people. Hawkweeds, oh goodness, hawkweeds. So again, we got two of them. We got orange hawkweed and we've got meadow hawkweed. They all have these furry little basal leaves, and my whole yard is taken over by them. I know it right in the spring. They're one of the first things that pop up. I see those little leaves, and there they are. And then those flowers follow. They kind of get dandelion-like seed heads, so they get that fluffy seed head, that little ball of seeds. Unregulated, yet again, there's a lot of it, and there's a lot of it everywhere. I know there are some counties that have them listed as noxious weeds. We don't have that. There's too much, far too much. The special thing that they do, they create a really thick mat of roots. So almost like sod, the whole ground can just be fully taken over by their roots. So they're pretty tricky to manage. Herbicide is typically the recommendation there. Luckily, they only produce about 20 to 50 seeds per flower. They have this special thing where they don't need any time to germinate. They can fall off that flower and they can hit the ground and they can germinate right away. Pretty cool superpower. Their seeds are only typically viable up to 7 years. So that's a pretty average seed viability range. Let's see here. One thing to know about hawkweeds if you're managing them, start from the outside of the population and work in. The outside of the population produces more seeds than the inside of the population. So the center, you know, they already know they've taken over, and they know they don't need to produce as much seed and disperse. So start outside and work in if you're working on hawkweeds. If you're going to do mechanical work, dig up the whole root system. So almost like you're removing sod. I know they have tools for that, so kind of think about that. Oxeye daisy, kind of like hawkweeds, they're everywhere. Unregulated, they can produce up to 26,000 seeds. I'm going to speed up a little bit here so we can pass on to Abigail soon. And then viable up to 40 years. That's a long one. This is one we're never going to get rid of. At a small scale, you can definitely manage it pretty easily on your property. Pulling's effective throughout the growing season. Foliar spraying, again, that 2,4-D, or even Roundup is pretty useful. Okay, I'm going to pass it on to Abigail. She's got a few slides for you. Then we'll open it up for questions. Yep.
Okay. Hi, I'm Abigail. I will just be talking a little bit about some of the community resources that we have and just general information. So first, I want to talk about our Community Invasive Species Management Program. So this is a program that the county has now where we help get landowners different materials and resources to be able to manage invasive species on their property. So this was it was located out of Sugarloaf, but with some personnel changes, it ended up making more sense for TNI and the Cook County Highway Department to take it over. So that is now where it is based out of. And so why we do this is we always just want more people managing invasive species. TNI are obviously out there doing this work every single day, but we cannot get to everything. I'm sure you've seen pansy, you've seen the valerian. There's just no way we could do it all by ourselves. So that's why this program was created, to get landowners helping to manage invasive species on their property. And then it also just this program helps make it more affordable and accessible for homeowners to manage. We provide different tools like loppers, backpacks with herbicide, hand sprayers, and different PPE like gloves and goggles. And then Tia and I will actually, if you want some herbicide, we'll do that mixing ourselves. So this makes it more affordable for homeowners, so you don't have to go out there and buy a whole jug of some herbicide yourself. It also makes it more safe because Tia and I are certified pesticide applicators. So we've been trained and certified in order to do the mixing and the spraying. And then we will do some education with homeowners and educate them on how to properly spray and how to do it in a safe way for themselves and for the environment in general. This also just produces less hazardous waste. If we're mixing for each person, every homeowner doesn't need to go out and buy a huge jug of herbicide themselves. And inevitably there would probably be some left over. So it definitely reduces hazardous waste and just cost for people in general with us doing the mixing and providing herbicide and other materials to homeowners. Yes, that is why we do it. And then how you do it is, it's really simple. If you go to the Cook County Agriculture Inspector page, there's a very short registration form that you can fill out. And then that's how you get registered for the program. There is a very small cost. We only charge $20 to do this service, so that just covers a little bit of the cost of the herbicide, and then obviously some of mine and Tia's labor time to do that. So it's a pretty accessible way to get some herbicide or other materials for homeowners to go out and manage stuff on their property. Tia and I don't do a lot of management of species like tansy because it's everywhere, and on the noxious weeds list, it's only listed as restricted. So most of our time and energy goes towards those species that are listed as the eradicate or control. So it's great if homeowners can go out there and get some of those lesser species on the list. We would love to be doing that work ourselves, but we just don't have the time and the manpower to be able to do that. With this program, we'll also sometimes do home visits. So we can do a home visit, help you identify some invasive species and come up with a management plan as well. And then we also do, like I said, some education with that, teaching you how to use the different things and how to do that safely. We only give out herbicide backpacks or hand sprayers for species that are on the noxious weeds list, like tansy or those other things. Just because there are natives like raspberries that people will often ask for herbicide for that's taking over, a septic mound or something. So we don't provide herbicide for native species like that. It's only those restricted or those noxious weeds that we will provide the herbicide for. And so anyways, let me know if you're interested in joining that program at all. You can get my email if you're interested, or like I said, getting onto the agriculture inspector website on the county page. So that's a little bit about that program. Another thing I want to talk about is called Plant Responsibly. So this is a guide that I have created that's supposed to help educate homeowners and people who are wanting to plant different species on what they should be planting, or just, maybe just getting people to look and think a little bit more about what they're wanting to plant on their property. This guide is not released yet. I was working on it this spring, didn't get it quite done, and then field season hit, so I'll be working on it again this fall and hopefully getting it released this fall. So what I did is I took a bunch of different common weedy species that people like to put, and by weedy I mean like spreads easily and are non-native. So I took a whole bunch of weedy different species that are non-native, and then tried to find a native substitute that you could plant instead of that non-native species and plant this native species instead. So I tried to look at what they look like, where they grow, how they grow, when they bloom, how tall they are, if they're aquatic, if they like full sun. So I really tried to take a common plant that people plant and then trying to find a better native option. And that was kind of hard. I did my best. It's probably not perfect. So that I have options for native trees, flowers, and grasses. So hopefully that will be out this fall. And you know, we're trying to choose native plants because we don't want to introduce more non-native, invasive, weedy species into the county. Because most of the species on the noxious weeds list came into the United States or Cook County from the garden and ornamental trade. So we're just trying to cut down on that overall. And why choose a non-native plant when you can choose a beautiful native plant? Another point is just because you can get seeds of something doesn't mean you should plant them. There was some research done last summer or the last couple of years in Minnesota, and I don't remember exactly which agency did it, but they tried to order all the species on the noxious weeds list off of various like garden sites online, and they were looking at how many of those plants they could actually get their hands on in Minnesota, even though it should be illegal to get those plants in Minnesota. And they were pretty much able to get their hands on all of the plants on the noxious weeds. There was a couple different sites that were like, hey, this is actually illegal in your state. But pretty much most of the sites didn't actually check with the local laws before sending those out. And so not only were they able to get their hands on most of those weeds that are illegal to have in Minnesota, but sometimes those companies didn't even send the seed of the plant of what they said it was. So they weren't even sending the proper seed. So that's a whole different issue. So just because you can get some seed does not mean you should plant it. There are great nurseries for native plants in Minnesota. Shoreview Natives out of Two Harbors is a great option for getting native seed. And then there's Prairie Moon Nursery, which I think is south of the cities, is another great option.
Way south.
Way south of the cities. Southern Minnesota. So yeah, those are some great options for getting native seeds here. And then just because, you know, we have invasive species here and you may think they are beneficial to our native environment, and you know, sometimes they may be good. But just because you see, you know, a butterfly lay their eggs on a certain plant, it may look like that is helping the ecosystem, but you don't know if the larva is actually going to survive to adulthood. I was like listening to a podcast the other day that's saying just because you think it looks like it's going to succeed doesn't actually mean that it's going to succeed. So that's another consideration when planting to take into consideration. And like I said, that should come out this fall or winter and will be on the county website. Was there any questions about that? Great. So this is a really great, I don't know how that ended up there, that's whatever. So this is a really great site to look at for when you're trying to plant responsibly. This is called Minnesota Wildflowers. It is a really great website. It has tons of great resources. It has, you know, a lot of identification tips. It has so many pictures. It has what habitat they like. And then most importantly, it has the origin and the status in Minnesota. So we have, yes.
I will say, like for valerian, like I told you before, it's just a Cook County noxious weed. So sometimes they put eradicate on it when it's not actually listed as an eradicate species. So do be careful with that, but it'll definitely tell you the obvious that it's invasive.
Yeah, so it's not perfect, but generally the information that we found on here is pretty solid. You can at least look at the origin and see if it's a native species or not, and then you could take that into consideration when you're making planting recommendations. So yeah, it generally has the origin and the status. Those are some different. So these are the areas in Minnesota where it's present, but those are non-native invasive. And then this is the native range in Minnesota as well. Yeah, and there's great identification tips on there. And then I actually was looking, they have a little forum on the bottom of each flower, or different species, and I was actually on there this spring looking at garden valerian, and I happened to go all the way to the bottom of the comments, and I saw somebody had posted from Cook County asking about managing garden valerian. So then I called Tia up and I'm like, hey, here's a new population of garden valerian in Cook County that we don't even know about yet. So we were able to go do a site visit with that homeowner this summer already. So that was a pretty great way a resource just for us to find out about new populations in Cook County. There we go. This is another great resource. This is through the DNR. It is called Restore Your Shore. And you can choose a different county that you're in. I had selected Cook County. And then you can choose which type of a species you want to look at. So ferns and wildflowers, grasses, sedges and rushes, trees and shrubs and vines. And then you can choose a habitat. So this I would recommend is if you're looking at planting a species and different planting recommendations. So you could look at, oh, do I want to plant something by my pond, or do I have a prairie that has full sun that I want to plant in? And then you could choose the area. Is it, in a wooded area? Is it on an edge of the forest? Or is it in a prairie getting full sun? And then if you wanted something that was really tall, or if you want something shorter, and you could even sort by color. So this is a great resource for finding particular species that you could plant on your own property. Any questions about that? And then I'll hand it back to Tia.
Okay, so this is the event that I mentioned that's kind of about spotted knapweed, tansy, some of these common things that we have. It's this Wednesday, July 23rd, starting at 1 o'clock. It's called Pull, Plant, Protect the Gunflint Trail. This is a partnership with the Gunflint Scenic Byway. They had this idea and we helped bring that into fruition. So anybody and everybody that is able to come and help, we're going to start off by just having an info session at 2 o'clock. At 1, if you want to come early, there's going to be treats. We'll have tables set up with some freebies and things like that. And then at 2 o'clock, we'll have that info session. And then at 2:30, we're just going to go out for 1 hour on sections of the Gunflint Trail. We're actually going to be at the end of the trail, so in this area. We're starting at the Seagull Community Center, the Seagull Fire Hall, and from there we'll go out just within the next few miles from there. And we'll be pulling that spotted knapweed, tansy, hopefully not too much thistle, that one hurts. And then as much sweet clover as we can do. There's a lot of that, so we're going to try our best. And then when we get back at 3:30, we're going to have a prize drawing. So Nancy Seaton with the Gunflint Scenic Byway has collected gift certificates and merchandise from a lot of our businesses up and down the Gunflint Trail for that drawing. So there will be that. Moonlight Lodge is doing their famous cookie ice cream sandwiches. So those will be there. Yeah, they're really good. So yeah. So this is Wednesday this week, July 23rd, starting at 1. Just get there before 2. We're only pulling for an hour, just 1 hour of your time to help and protect and conserve our natural resources up the Gunflint Trail.
Yeah, just a comment. The sweet clover is just covered with native bees. Yeah, I know it is not native, but I cannot make myself feel something.
Yeah, I mean, we typically don't manage it. It was a request for this. It has a tendency to eat into roadways, even though they put it into seed mixes. They'll actually really break apart the road, which is not great. So I don't know why they put it in seed mixes, but yeah, a lot of species, like even garden valerian, there's been some bees on it and things like that. Bird's foot trefoil, the little yellow stuff that you see all around right now, that one's a good one for pollinators. It's actually great forage for deer and other species. So yeah, some of these species, they have positive attributes. And a lot of times too, like even that podcast Abigail was talking about, if there's an option for our native pollinators, they're typically and more often going to choose native species over the non-native species. So they do have a preference, but if a whole area is taken over by it.
But they've got to be there. But I mean, wildflowers that are native have to be there.
Yep. And so if they have the option, they'll choose it. If they don't, we're definitely going to see them on a lot of things. But yeah, no, those are great points. Some of these things definitely have some attributes for pollinators, so keep that in mind for sure. But yes, please show up, sign up. We've got a QR code here. Dave's got he's got a flyer there, so if you want to scan that QR code, you can. Otherwise, you can talk to Abigail here. Maybe she can write down your email, your name, and then we'll have her email at the end of this. It's right here as well, so you can email or just to sign up if you'd like. And even if you don't sign up, just come. Just come. We'll be happy to have you, for sure. We won't say no, and won't turn you away.
There's my email for the Community Invasives program as well.
There it is. Yeah, and I'll have it on the last slides too, so free to take it out. Okay. I'm opening the floor for questions, and I'm going to go ahead and put our emails here, so if you're not asking questions, you write that down. Yeah.
So once you pull the whole pile of invasive, what do you do with it?
Yeah.
Good question. Because you can't transport it, you need a permit for me. So this is where management time really comes into play. So if you're pulling things that are already gone to seed, you want to bag those or set them on a tarp and let them dry. Leave them at the site, but set them out to dry if it's at your house. If you're doing it before they go to seed, well before, you could just leave them. Leave them right there. Most of them are not going to be like knotweed where they can just fragment and propagate from anything. So if it's tansy and you're getting it right now where it's not even, some species if you pull them and they're close enough to going to seed, they'll send all of their nutrients and resources up and they'll still go to seed even if they're out of the ground. Tansy's not at that point yet for the season. But if it's been flowering and it's been at its peak for 3 weeks, it can probably still go to seed and shoot out some seed when you pull it. So you'll definitely want to bag that one. But otherwise, leave them where you pull them. And that's the best thing we can say because we don't have a disposal site in Cook County. Some counties, like St. Louis County, have places where you could actually take them and they'll put them in a biochar system and burn them. If North Shore Waste had something like that for us, we could do that, but we're not there yet. We are and have been in talks for the last couple of years about creating a biochar program, meaning we would put invasive species and whatever else in a kiln to be heated up really high and turned into biochar that we could then use as a resource for soil stabilizers, water filtration, all sorts of things. So that is in the talks. We do have hope that we'll have somewhere for disposal at some point. But yeah, for now, pull them earlier than going to seed and leave them where they lay. Yeah, great question though, it's a hard one. Yeah.
I noticed coming up that there's a lawn section that's not mowed as you get here. And then as you get within 3 or 4 miles of here, it looks like it's been mowed for the most part.
Yeah.
Is that by design?
I'm not really sure. I have to see the spot. We have only a couple spots where we've designated as do not mow. We're actually getting permanent signs to be put up in some spots, but there's only 2 spots. One's near George Washington Pines and the other's on County Road 48. But yeah, I'm not really sure if it was
So maybe just haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, maybe they haven't gotten there, maybe it's conditions. They did just start at the end of the trail last week. So yeah, I know these last several miles are mowed. At least, I don't even know if they've made it to magnetic yet. Yeah, but they do at least 2 or 3 sweeps. Those blades are only so big, so they do 2 or 3 sweeps. So they have to go back and forth and back and forth. But yeah, this is actually a great time of year for them to be mowing for spotted knapweed as it's getting ready to flower. And even, a week or 2 from now, it would have been a good time to do it. But otherwise, if they had done it in August when it's going to seed, it spreads everywhere. So not helpful then, but yeah. So our mowers try to be mindful of that, and we communicate and work with them to clean our mowers as much as possible, especially before we come up the Gunflint trail. We actually get all the mowers cleaned up as best as possible. There's lots of nooks and crannies, and then they're trailered up to the end of the Gunflint trail to start. So we're not tracking anything new and weird from around the county. So yeah.
Any other one, not to put you on the spot, but it's been pretty widely circulated that you won a national award. Can you say that's phenomenal.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I was just awarded the North American Invasive Species Management Association, NASMA, their Rita Baird Leadership Award. So this is for Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And it's just for early career professionals, which I am. I've been doing this for 4 years with the county. And I've just been really going hard with it and to trying to do my best by Cook County. And by no means has it been just me. Our Cook County Invasives Team has supplied me with mentors that I will be grateful for forever, from the Forest Service to the DNR. The county itself, our commissioners, my boss, our highway engineer, Robbie, has absolutely poured everything they have into this position and making sure that Cook County has this position filled and paid for full-time, not by a grant. And then adding Abigail into this the last 2 seasons has been just a world of change. Having somebody who can do a lot of the outreach and develop new materials and then physically be on the ground with me has been amazing. So yeah, definitely this has been a whole team effort to get this award, and I'm very appreciative and grateful and feel very lucky to receive it and get to go to Lake Tahoe to get the award. I will get to work, and there is a full conference for it, and it's really great to network with our counterparts across the U.S. and internationally. So that's really cool. But yes, thank you for saying that. But yeah, no, really appreciative of that. Anybody else with questions about invasive species? Yes.
Just a weird question, but like, is there a depository for these bugs that you throw on things to kill?
Yeah. So
like, where do you just like? I want to get rid of purple stripe. Where do I buy the bugs?
So typically, you can actually get them for free. There are places across the state where they've been reared in large populations of purple loosestrife or knapweed for many years, and so they're just reproducing on their own and in high numbers. And so those places, I think the DNR actually has a site you can fill out a registration form for if you got it on your property, and they'll send you the bugs, and then you put the bugs out, and then you look for them year after year and hope they're doing their job.
Like the bugs just appear in my mailbox?
Overnight, I just got some in the mail literally last week.
I have to go drive and meet somebody from the MGA last year.
Yeah, for that.
There must be like some like not anybody can order bugs, right? I have to have some training.
There is information and training to some of it, but it's a little easier than you might think. But yeah, and then the first round of purple loosestrife beetles I picked them up in Itasca County while I was there for an ag inspector conference. They have large, acres long sites of purple loosestrife, and they have these really robust biocontrol programs. I don't really have that much here, and that's another part of biocontrol is that you have to have a certain size of a population. If I've got just a few plants in my ditch, maybe my whole ditch is taken up, it might not be enough for the biocontrol. So a lot of times we like to say up to about an acre of these species. So yeah.
There's no bug that kills buckthorn.
No, just the cute goats that like dig it and then poop out the seeds everywhere. There is really good research that's out about buckthorn though, really positive research. The seed bank viability is only 2 years. So that's really, really short compared to some of these species that go up to 40 years or decades. But yeah, only 2 years. So if you stay on top of your buckthorn for at least 2 years and don't let any of it go to fruit and reproduce, you're going to have it managed. And if you have acres and acres of it, though, it's going to take a while. So do your thing. But we don't. We're still ahead of the curve here in Cook County for buckthorn. There's really not a lot of it. We find small stuff every year, but we're doing pretty good on that front. Yes.
Hawkweed.
Yeah.
Do they only reseed, or do the plants live through the winter and reseed the next summer?
Yes. So yeah, their root systems outlast through they have rhizomatous growth or vegetative growth through their root systems. So they do go dormant in the winter, and then they will come up just anywhere that their roots were and where their seeds were. So yes, they can reproduce through seed, they can reproduce vegetatively, and they are perennial. Yeah. I hope that answers the question. Yeah, a lot of them are perennial and long living, and that's a part of being invasive. If it's annual species, those things are pretty weak and just not long lived and not super hardy. So yeah. Okay.
We're